What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Today we're bringing you a very nostalgic build, a character that we actually used in an old modded Let's Play we made on the channel. Eventually we created a build in honor of this character, and now we've remastered it to really flesh it out and build upon the character, enhancing the backstory drastically and improving the statistical side of things too. It goes without saying that the Warrior of the Reclamations has been rigorously playtested to build its unyielding playstyle and to ensure we've allocated the most effective skills and perks possible. On top of that, we've added even more to the role-playing to make your playthrough more immersive than ever before. We've also got the slightly altered version of the backstory to suit those of you out there with access to the alternate start mod. This is Milara Sarethi, the Warrior of the Reclamations. Milara Sarethi lived a life devoted to the Reclamations in Morrowind until tragedy and mortal danger forced her to flee. Under the guidance of the Daedric princes she gave her life to, Milara will become their champion, a warrior fit to take on gods. Before we get into the build, don't forget that we have timestamps in the description to help you find your way around the video. But with that said, let's get straight into the backstory and role-playing. Milara Sarethi was born in southern Morrowind, near the great city of Narcissus. She grew up in a temple devoted to the Reclamations where her father served as a priest. Life in the priesthood was humble. They didn't have a lot, but thanks to the fertile lands and their reintroduced use of slavery, food in Narcissus was quite affordable. Despite the opposition from the Empire in the past against slavery, Milara knew how important slaves were for Dunmer economy, especially in the crippled state Morrowind was currently in. Milara's youth was enjoyed learning basic magic in the schools of conjuration and destruction from the kind elves of the priesthood. Her father was the only priest in the temple with a child, and they all unanimously treated her like kin. The areas surrounding the temple were equally as exciting to the young dark elf. Milara would play in the fields, climbing atop mushrooms to lie down and soak up the sun on warm days. Sometimes she would even take a blanket and a basket full of salt rice and ash yams to have a picnic. From atop some of the taller mushrooms, she could usually see a mile in every direction, and she would watch the world go by. During the evenings, as well as every morning before leaving to play or practice magic, she would say her prayers to Azura, Boethia, and Mephala, and she would feel their grace granted to her in return. One clear day in the Deshan, Milara sat upon her favorite mushroom, straining her will to cast a perfect fireball spell. She'd learnt a lot since her youth, and now that she was 20, she still enjoyed coming to the same spots to practice her skills in isolation. Her only fear now was that the mushrooms would eventually give way under her weight. After a moment of intense concentration, she fired a ball of flame from her hand. The cast was near perfect, and had the other priests been there to see it, they would have surely applauded. As the flames turned to smoke and vanished into the atmosphere, in its place she noticed the smoke wasn't fully disappearing, and then she realized it wasn't coming from her fireball, it was coming from the distance, from the temple. She sprung to her feet and leaped off the mushroom, bending her knees and landing with one hand on the ground for additional support, and then she ran towards the temple. When she arrived, she saw the temple give way to the flames, crumbling like charcoal. Outside, the priests were defending themselves with spells against the onslaught of Argonians. Milara had heard all about the Dunmer's experience with Argonian raiders, lizards seeking revenge for their history and aiming to liberate any remaining slaves. The cold-blooded fools couldn't tell the difference between a place of worship and a slave farm. She had a foul taste in her mouth. The Argonians outnumbered the priests 10 to 1, and one by one they were chopped down by the raiders. She saw her father impaled by a sword to the heart, and she could do nothing to stop it. When the giant horde finished their slaughter, they turned and saw Milara standing still, shell-shocked from what she'd seen, and then they came for her. Milara regained her wits and began to run. She could only hope that her knowledge of the area would give her the advantage, for what she'd seen had drained much of her will to go on. She lost them somewhere in the forests. Winding rivers, wide mushrooms, and a mess of trees jutting out from the ground in every direction gave her plenty of cover, and eventually she slowed to a walk, recovering her breath and processing what had happened. Almost everything had been taken away from her. Despite her fatigue, she didn't stop moving. She still had plenty of salt rice from her picnic, so with no appetite, she forced herself to eat and kept walking. Ahead, the path split in two directions. One path, an ascending trail under dense tree cover, headed northwest, probably towards the Velothi Mountains. The other, on even ground, left the forest and seemed to head directly north towards the inner sea. She looked both ways, unsure which would be best to lead her to safety. Now this is where we need to take a quick break from the story, as you'll have to decide her fate for the rest of it. The path Milara takes will depend on whether or not you have access to the alternate start mod. If you do have this mod, Milara will take the northbound trail to the inner sea. If you have the vanilla game without the mod, Milara will take the northwest path to the Velothi Mountains. With the alternate start mod, Milara continued north, finally reaching the sea. The salt rice had given her energy, but it had also given her a mighty thirst. A ship was docked just ahead. She snuck aboard, stole a water skin from the kitchens, and stowed away. Wherever the ship docked next, Milara would begin her new life. But the ship never docked. Instead, in the perilous freezing cold waters of the Sea of Ghosts, the ship wrecked, killing all of its crew. Milara was hidden in the ship's hold. The ship had navigated poorly and collided with a huge and deadly sharp rock, piercing the hold and flooding the ship with water. Milara swam through the gaping hole, making her escape before it could drag her down to the depths, and so Milara entered Skyrim from the north, shipwrecking off the coast. Without the alternate start mod, Milara took the covered trail into the mountains. It was a grueling hike. The air was thinner, making her sick from the changing altitude, and her thirst was so intense that her throat began to throb. As she walked, she noticed mushrooms growing from crevices, as well as a small patch of marshmallow. Marshmallow couldn't grow without water, and the mushrooms would surely have wilted too. She was filled with a new hope and managed to find a small mountain stream of fresh running water. Revitalized and alive, she made her way west. She left the Velothi Mountains and entered the Jural Mountains. She decided she'd turn off soon, making a life for herself in Skyrim or Cyrodiil, but before she could make a decision, it was made for her, and she was caught by an Imperial patrol and carted off to Helgen. After escaping Helgen or making her ways onto the shores of northern Skyrim, Milara will aim to create a new life for herself while upholding her beliefs. She will start having lucid visions of the Reclamations as they guide her to their shrines, and to Whiterun in the case of Mephala. She will work on carrying out their will, collecting and protecting their artifacts, and upholding their values. She will do all of this while living by her father and the temple's example. She will also steer clear of the four corners of the House of Troubles, not involving herself in quests for the Daedric princes Malakath, Molag Bal, Shea Gorath, and Mehrunes Dagon. She will follow the main story in the Dragonborn DLC. Not only will her Dragonborn powers and status keep her safe from many who wish to harm her, but getting to Solstheim for the Dragonborn DLC will be very appealing. In Solstheim, she can find a temple to the Reclamations in Raven Rock, and she can also revisit many facets of her heritage in her early life. She will follow the Dawnguard DLC, siding with the Dawnguard. She can join the Companions as long as she cures the Lycanthropy curse, and the College of Winterhold will be a great place for her to enhance her conjuration and destruction skills. Of course, as mentioned before, Azura's quest for Azura's Star, Boethiah's quest, and Mephala's quest are all essential to her role-playing. The reason we suggest taking Azura's Star over the Black Star, even though it is less useful, is because it would be fundamentally out of character for Milara to betray one of the Reclamations. She worships Azura and will do everything in her power to help her. You will also want to destroy the Dark Brotherhood, as she knows they are the enemies of the Morag Tong. She has heard that they are a most unholy faction. You'll also get that sweet Shrouded Hood in the process. Now let's get into the stats, standing stone, and race. Milara Sarethi is a Dunmer of Morrowind. She can call on her ancestors' wrath once a day for 60 seconds, allowing her to summon a barrier of flame around herself, but this power will soon be made redundant by one of her primary spells, Flame Cloak. She also has a 50% resistance to fire, and thanks to her Dunmer blood, she'll gain a bonus of +10 to destruction. I think it's cool that she uses Flame Cloak and also has a resistance to fire naturally. It feels very realistic that it burns everyone else but not her. In terms of standing stones, use the Lover Stone early on for leveling your diverse skill set, and then switch out to the Lord Stone or the Atronach Stone. Both are useful, but the Atronach is better if you are willing to deal with the drawback of having to recast some of your conjuration spells. If not, just use the Lord Stone. Milara's stat spread will be 50% health to help protect her alongside the absorb health effect of her sword, and then 50% magicka to keep you casting any spells you need to alongside your reduced casting costs. You will gain some additional stamina from enchanting, so an investment here isn't too important. Now it's time to head on into the next section where we'll talk about skills, perks, spells, and combat playstyle. The main skills for this build will be two-handed, destruction, conjuration, heavy armor, and enchanting. We'll talk about the specific perks to take from each of these skills in a minute, but before that you'll want to get your hands on the following spells. From destruction you'll want to focus on fire-based spells. Fireball is the primary damage dealer, but Flame Cloak is also very effective. It fits the Dunmer style and offers great protection from melee attackers. As for conjuration, use all of the elemental Atronachs and the Conjure Dremora summon spell. The Flame Atronach is the most fitting, but keep in mind that you will have two Atronachs and that you'll also be using fire-based destruction spells, so it's well worth changing up the elements you use so you can do more damage and counter any resistances your opponents might have. A Frost Atronach can soak up damage and destroy melee foes, while Shock and Flame are great for ranged support. Necromancy is not an option for Milara as it strongly opposes Dunmer ethics and traditions. Shouts aren't essential, but as Milara will be embracing her Dragonborn side, any powerful basic shouts like Fire Breath and Whirlwind Sprint are worth utilizing. The former gives you another projectile to use, and it is fire-based, which is definitely cool, while the latter is great for mobility and dodging arrows and spells. With all of that said, let's now get into the essential perks for the Warrior of the Reclamations. Milara Sarethi spent the bulk of her youth in peace, her existence dedicated to greater powers, but one cruel encounter with reality thrust her into a life of danger and instability. Milara wasn't going to fade away into obscurity though. She adapted and became the Warrior of the Reclamations. With her unwavering faith and the support of Mephala, she wields one of the deadliest blades in Tamriel, fueled by blood spilled from betrayal. From the two-handed skill tree, take the middle branch up to Sweep via Devastating Blow. Sweep will let you sideways power attack to hit all the people in front of you, and with the Ebony Blades life-sucking enchantment, that means tons of damage and tons of health restored if too many melee enemies come for you at once. Devastating Blow is also great for the ability to decapitate your enemies and for the 25% damage boost to standing power attacks. Decapitation prevents enemies from being reanimated by necromancers, which is a great way of upholding a Dunmer traditionalist's view against the dark practice. A Dunmer fighter is nothing without a strong understanding of magic's destructive potential. Milara learned to cast the Fireball masterfully as a youth, and now it is essential to her arsenal. From the Destruction skill tree, go for the left branch, the fourth branch up to Adept Destruction, and then the far right branch. Destruction dual casting will make your destruction spells far more effective. This is especially important considering the fact that you will not be using your sword and destruction at the same time. It will always be one or the other, so you'll have both hands free. Similar to Destruction, the Warrior of Reclamations uses her innate Dunmer abilities to eventually master the art of conjuration too, and the importance of this school of magic was drilled into her by the priests at her temple. From the conjuration skill tree, we suggest taking the left branch up and around to Twin Souls, and then the far right branch to expert conjuration. Twin Souls lets you have two Atronachs at once, Atromancy makes them last twice as long, and Elemental Potency makes them 50% more powerful. With a mighty two-handed blade capable of draining the life of its victims, scorching destruction spells, and the support of Atronachs summoned from the depths of Oblivion, Milara is certainly not lacking in the offensive side of things, but she is a warrior, and a warrior does not go into battle unprotected and vulnerable. With the favor of the Reclamations, it is unlikely that any ungodly bandit could harm her, but she isn't taking any chances. For that reason, she calls upon heavy armor. From the heavy armor skill tree, grab the entire left branch. Conditioning will remove any carry weight from your heavy armor and prevents it from slowing your movement speed down. And finally, to get the best out of her equipment, or at least the pieces that aren't already blessed by Daedric princes, Milara will utilize enchanting. From this skill tree, we recommend going for the entire middle branch up to and including extra effect. So we've got all the skills and perks as well as your arsenal of spells and shouts, but here's how it will all play out in a combat situation. Kick things off by conjuring two Atronachs of your choice to best suit the situation. Then dual cast a Flame Cloak for protection and switch to either dual wielding Fireball to hit distant foes or to your Ebony Blade to slice and dice up close. Whatever you switch to at any given time is situational, but as long as you're set up with your Atronachs and a cloak, both will usually be effective. If you're taking a lot of damage, the Ebony Blade will give you that added survivability as you regain health with each successful hit. Most of the time you will be using the blade, however obviously using ranged projectiles can be useful, especially considering that Fireball does area damage. Also, it's worth mentioning that aside from its defensive properties, properties, the flame cloak looks awesome alongside the black smoky aura surrounding your ebony mail. As for gear, you will be using the gifts bestowed upon you by the Reclamations. In terms of apparel, use Boethia's ebony mail along with ebony gauntlets and ebony boots. Enchant the boots with Fortify two-handed and Fortify stamina, and the gauntlets with Fortify two-handed and Fortify magicka. Along with this, put a ring and necklace of your choice on to add in 4 new enchantment slots. In these slots, enchant for Fortify two-handed on both and Fortify destruction on one with Fortify conjuration on the other. Your weapon of choice will of course be Mafala's artifact, the Ebony Blade, fully upgraded by betraying allies. Also get Azura's Star for role-playing purposes. Normally this would help keep your enchanted weapons charged, however the Ebony Blade actually has unlimited charges, so you'll just be getting it for role-playing reasons. Remember that you must do what Azura wants you to do in her quest in order to acquire the star. Finally, you'll also be using the Shrouded Hood, which you can pick up when you destroy the Dark Brotherhood. It gives this build an incredibly unique aesthetic and a 25% bonus to sneak for whatever that's worth. Also, give the build the full amount of weight available in the customization menu to make it look the best, 100% for role-playing purposes, of course. Thank you so much for watching this build all the way through and supporting the glory that role-playing in Skyrim brings to the world. Subscribe to FudgeMuppet if you're new and want more content like this, and if you want to help us grow our channel and think we deserve it, fireball that like button. Don't forget that timestamps can be found in the description below, along with links to our FudgeMuppet members' social media accounts. Again, thanks so much for watching. I'm Michael from FudgeMuppet, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.